Our webinar today is titled 7 Ways to Get Control of Cybersecurity in Higher Education. My name is Joe Murphy, marketing team here at Cygilant, and I'm joined by Kevin Lance, our VP of Product Management, and Evan Valensky, one of our senior cybersecurity advisors. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me here today. And I'll open it up, let you guys introduce yourself to the audience a little bit. We'll get started with you, Kevin.
Thanks, Joe. As Joe mentioned, I'm head of product management here at Cygilant. So my responsibilities are really around designing and building the tech stack that our SOC teams and our security advisors are using on a daily basis.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Evan, you want to tell the audience?
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. My name is Evan Valensky. As it says, I'm the senior cybersecurity advisor here at Cygilant. I've been working here for quite a while, and I am someone who's going to be directly in contact with all of our customers anytime they're working with us and trying to take them through the product and meet with them. I actually have a background in higher ed. Before my job here, I worked security for 9 years at a large university here in Vancouver. So I'm well aware of the issues that higher ed can be faced with.
Awesome. Thank you, Evan. So everyone, in the next 30 minutes, we're going to go over 7 things that we've learned from helping our clients in higher education, provide you with some field insights, battle-tested processes and procedures, and then provide you with some actionable items on how you can get it done, even if you don't have the resources available. So before we dive into the 7 things that we've learned, let's take a moment to address the elephant in the room here, a little guy named anxiety. We get it here at Cygilant, and working in IT at a higher education institution, your use cases might be different, but some stress can be caused by some of the things that you see on this list here on the slide. Whether you don't have the time or the resources, right? There's never enough hours in the day. You're not really sure what to expect when you're protecting yourself against the ever-evolving threat landscape. And with so many tools out there at your disposal, it's really hard to figure out where to start. So I'll pass it over to Kevin to kick us off. And Kevin will get us started on 7 things that we've learned in cybersecurity for higher education. So Kevin?
Thanks, Joe. So let's start here on number 1, and it's something Evan and I have talked about here. It's that colleges and universities are really a lot like small cities, and you face a lot of the same problems as an open institution would, and it's a lot different than a private business. So Evan, could you talk a little bit about what those differences are from a private business, and what types of threats are particular to higher ed?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kevin. Unlike a private business, there may be something like a student portal that has to be open for the world, and that can't be locked down from bad actor countries, or maybe there's a huge network with guests that are coming in and out all the time, and who knows what's on those devices. Honestly, these days we're seeing a lot of things like targeted phishing, where administrators are being attacked in institutions that have migrated to Office 365. And I love Office 365. It's great. We even use it here at Cygilant. But you have to be smart with that deployment. Earlier this year, Verizon did a data breach report across a whole bunch of industries, and they focused in as well on higher ed. And they reported that roughly a quarter of all attacks in the education vertical are actually web application attacks. Every successful attack I've seen this year could have easily been prevented if the institution had just simply enabled 2-factor, just as a starting point. And honestly, even if you do have it enabled, you can't make exceptions for executives or VIPs or anything like that. Everyone is susceptible. 2 days ago, I actually had a higher ed client who told me that they finally started rolling out 2-factor. I was so excited for them. I was like, oh man, they had an attack about 6 months ago. It's been a long road to get them there. And I was really psyched for them. And then they told me, but right now it's a slow roll. We're only going to start with our small partners. And I was just so bummed. Like, that's just not enough. He knows that, but it's his boss that needs to be convinced. You can't make exceptions. The other major thing to think about in the higher ed space is just general network security. Most smaller institutions I deal with, they've been slowly growing for years, and they probably started with just a small single network. Students and guests are coming in and out on that network, and that same network is being used by administrators and faculty and staff. And it's really critical to have some sort of student network or hopefully even a guest network in place so that there's network segregation from these unknown devices that are mostly filled with viruses that are just coming in and spreading. The other thing to think about is, do you have a plan? What if you are breached? I've seen a lot of clients that just assume that they have security monitoring and so they're good to go. And unfortunately, it's not really how the world works. Ransomware is everywhere these days. Do you guys have backups in place that you can revert to so that you don't have to pay that ransom? And in a larger sense, do you have a disaster recovery plan at all? When I used to be working at the university, we had a flood in one of our server rooms one day, and it was, totally unexpected. The room next door was having construction, and it tripped some sort of water main, and then all of a sudden the sprinklers went off, and the rack space was completely flooded. Every rack was not only completely submerged, but even had grime and dirt that was in the system. And one of our largest labs was out of commission for many weeks, and there wasn't a robust enough plan where we could spin things back up and revert to other machines. The lesson there is it's not just cybersecurity you have to look at, but even just environmental security. Come up with a plan that can work for more than one situation. The last thing too to remember is that universities and colleges, there's a lot of information that can't be as protected as people would like it to be. Maybe you have a web page that has some kind of public forum for I don't know, past grads to sign up for an alumni reunion. I've seen that before, and it's connected to a database on the back end. Is that database protected from, say, a SQL injection? It's really important to put into place policies so that private data actually stays private.
Number two here is a little bit about spending time wisely, and I think we could probably put time and budget into that. So you touched on network security a little bit there. What are some of the trade-offs to think about there in terms of time and budget?
Yeah, totally. One of the problems that we have at a institution is that what is every device on your network? It could be all kinds of stuff. You might have a Windows workstation or a Cisco firewall or some kind of an access point. All those logs are generating, sorry, all those devices are generating security logs. And those logs might have all kinds of important information on them in relation to the health of your network. That's thousands and thousands and thousands of logs being written every day, every week, every month. Is anybody reading those logs? And if you do have someone reading those logs, do they have the power to do anything with those logs? And do they have the time to do anything else? Or is this just their job? And you've hired someone who's just doing one thing all day long and they're not scalable. It's really hard to spend time wisely these days, especially in higher ed where we don't always have the budgets to do everything we want to do. It's really important to be using some sort of SIM, like us here at Cygilant, to analyze those logs. And it's hopefully connected to a SOC where actual real people can take a look at those logs that seem, odd or not part of your normal environment. Let somebody with the time and skills necessary to analyze those logs alert you to suspicious activities that you don't realize are even happening so that you have time to focus on your core infrastructural projects, or upgrades or what else you have on your plate. I have a hired client who a couple weeks ago was telling me, boy, our Windows servers are stuck on this old version because, I just don't have time. And he forgot that we were doing vulnerability scanning. So I could, walk him through and say, listen, I get that you don't have time. Let's come up with a remediation plan where you can take a small amount of time and just patch the super critical things now, and then next summer we'll come up with a larger plan to patch the things that are less critical. You're never going to be able to catch everything, so make sure you have the confidence that you're spending your time and your money as wisely as you can.
I think going back to what you were saying there, Evan, about all of the log and event analysis, and think about how that's really at core about getting more visibility. So what are some of the areas where more is better when it comes to visibility?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the first thing to start with is, do you know what's even on your network? Not just planned devices, but guests and what traffic is coming in and out. And do you have a list that's actually being updated? Are you getting alerts to devices that you don't expect, or all of a sudden there's a rogue access point, or anything in between those two things? You really want to have a clear picture of what's happening, at a quick glance. And also, if you need to, be able to generate some kind of larger feature-rich reports that give you more insight when you need it. The other thing is maybe you need to generate a smaller report that you can just give to your higher level executives. They don't need all that information. They just need, the top hits. Using something like our SOCU portal can get you those kinds of insights. It's a one pane of glass solution that can show you every node that you have security monitoring set up on, every device that you have vulnerability scans running on, and what actions or remediations you need to take so that you can elevate the security of these devices. At the same time, if you're using a SIM, you want to know what that service has been doing for you. Can you log in and confirm what alerts it fired, what incidents have been investigated lately, and how your security posture has changed over the past 3 months? Hopefully it's been getting better. It'd be nice to have some kind of hard evidence for that. If you're going to spend money on something, make sure that you're thinking of all the side perks a product can give you, aside from just that simple box tick that a service is being quote unquote monitored.
Yeah, yeah, and building on that box tick idea, um, going into compliance here. So in the U.S., there's FERPA requirements, which is for confidentiality of student data. I know there's similar regulations in Canada and other nations. And the problem with FERPA specifically is it doesn't really tell you which specific security controls that you are required to implement. You're kind of left to your own devices to figure out what are appropriate controls. So I know a lot of people that we talk to are using NIST core framework and some other frameworks. So, let's talk about that a little bit. And also, there's probably some other compliance requirements that apply as well outside of just the data confidentiality for students.
Oh yeah, for sure. And at the very start, before you can even get into that, you always have to work with your internal auditors on something like compliance. Together, you guys need to be considering, do you need NIST, and does your campus deal with medical records? If so, you're gonna have to fall under HIPAA. Or perhaps you run some kind of e-commerce division that accepts credit cards, and so you need to be PCI compliant. I had a very small college last year spin up sort of a secondary credit card page to like sell calendars, and normally their tuition and things like that are paid through a third party, but for this they were doing it directly, and then all of a sudden they had to be PCI compliant on this little tiny web page, and they didn't even know that was going to be an issue. Luckily we were able to generate a report for them and kind of guide them. And a good sim will do more than just look at your logs and check that box. It'll help you understand if you're passing your compliance requirements. You should be able to generate reports and have a discussion with your auditors based on those logs and reports that the sim is generating for you. And if a question does arise, can you prove that you're either covered or that you're going to generate a plan to become compliant? Something we do here is to make sure that we tailor the experience to you individually. If you're looking for some kind of sand template that you want to hit, we'll work together to get you there.
Great. And then, of course, we have to talk about, how to pay for all this. So we've talked a lot about different security controls and some of the technologies that go into a good security program. But, how do you pay for all this, especially in higher ed, where you're kind of balancing budgets against the core mission of the institution? Can you really afford? And so what do you need to do to maximize your security posture?
Yeah, I mean, as Kevin said, it's really hard in higher ed to get the money that you need and to kind of do the things that you want. And the key thing there is just try not to chase that latest blinking box. Instead, when budget decisions do occur, make sure that they're comprehensive and that they move you closer to that chosen end goal, whether it's compliance or security posture or hopefully both. And what that really means is, be wise with your budget. Spend that money wisely so that you aren't buying multiple tools that do all the same thing. I actually see this as a surprising amount, especially with my higher ed clients, where customers ask me if we support ingesting logs from all kinds of different vendors. And then I'll say to them, well, these three vendors, there's actually an overlap here. You're getting, I don't know, antivirus and malware from one and then from something else as well. Do you know why that is? What are your contracts like? Why is there an overlap here? Sometimes the customers I've seen, they don't even realize that they're licensed for software that has abilities they aren't even using. And almost every time I've seen this, it's because an IT director was given a mandate from, say, the president or some kind of school board, and nobody who actually implemented the solution was involved in that purchase decision. Make sure that the people are involved who are going to, carry out these purchases are planned in these future decisions that you're making for your environment. When you're at that purchase choice, at the same time, consider a company like us here at Cygilant, where we bundle security monitoring, vulnerability scanning, and patch management all into one solution. That's three tick boxes that you need that you can get from one vendor at a better price than you can do from three separate vendors.
Great. And then, so number 6 here, we say support openness. So Evan, what do we mean by openness, and how do you balance that with security?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most important things about a campus. They're places of learning, places of collaboration. You want to have the ability to be open and have guests and to have, outside participation, but you also need to be smart with how you're handling all these devices that are showing up on your network. You can't lock down the entire university. So you're always going to have to accept a small amount of risk, and it's a matter of planning what that risk is. Do you have a plan for how much of that risk you're willing to accept and how you're going to mitigate it and contain it? At the very least, some small things like what we talked about earlier with the two-factor authentication and a segregated guest network, that should be the baseline now in 2019 and moving forward. But what about actual campus resources? Maybe there's a computer lab where a professor is running a paper here and they need to collaborate with another instructor who's based out of somewhere like Japan. Is your firewall set up to allow that kind of traffic? And at the same time, if it is it locked down to only accept the traffic from that other specific institution where your collaborator in Japan is working? I'm a big believer in things like GeoIP blocking. That's a very, very achievable goal where you can reduce a huge portion of that bad traffic that's coming into your network. Does your network team know what that is? Do you have the tools to implement that? Something like that is an easy win for your IT team. They just have to be aware of capabilities of the software and hardware that you have in your network.
And then lastly, number 7 here, we really like to focus on the human aspect of security here at Cygilant. I think that's also really important in higher ed. But Evan, maybe you can dive into that a little bit more about how the human element comes into play in the higher ed space.
Yeah, totally. I mentioned earlier that Verizon did that big data breach report earlier this year. But one of the key finds from that report was that there's a clear lack of understanding that a lot of smaller institutions have on why they're being hit. It seems like the executive thinking is that, oh, well, we aren't big. We aren't partnered with some big company in Silicon Valley on some crazy high tech research. No one's going to come after us. They'll go after the big guys. And oh man, that's just not the case. Smaller institutions have something that's incredibly valuable, and that's personal information. Personal data on faculty and students and guests and postdocs and whoever else is there. And that's usually, honestly, less protected at these smaller institutions than at their larger siblings. You can have the best tech license, but if you don't understand what kind of data you're protecting and you haven't implemented that tech properly, you aren't going to achieve your goals in a higher security posture. The tech can't do it alone. When you purchase this tool, who's going to be using it? And what kind of extras do you get with it? Are you getting an actual service, or is it simply a tool you buy and you implement, but that no one's actually looking at or monitoring? These days in the IT space, when you buy something, although it may be advertised to, quote unquote, work right out of the box, it never will. It needs to be monitored, and that comes at a manpower cost. Can you afford that cost? And are the right people thinking about it? Do you even have the manpower? At the end of the day, no matter what vendor you go with, no matter what kind of software you're buying, communication is key. It starts and ends at communication and talking. And that's the biggest piece of advice that I tell all my clients: communication.
Great, thanks, Evan. So those are 7 things that we've learned from working with clients in the higher ed area, and also some of Evan's personal narratives from his own experience in higher ed. So if a lot of this sounds relatable to you, then maybe Cygilant can help. We offer a couple managed security services with a focus on mid-sized organizations. And the reason is because you're dealing with the same threats as the big enterprises, but obviously you've got to find ways to do more with less when it comes to your budget and your staff. So Cygilant offers a security monitoring service. It supplements the team that you already have. And in that service, we include your SIM, which is installed and managed for you. It comes with 24-hour security operations center that are monitoring all those events coming in, investigating them, triaging them, and putting in investigation notes for you, so that if we do need to notify you of something, you're hitting the ground running. You're not getting a cold start on this alert we detected. Our SOCs are located on 3 different continents, so we have around-the-clock coverage. And in addition to that security monitoring service, we also have proactive vulnerability management and patch management services. And those are designed to help you detect and remediate those vulnerabilities before the bad actors that Evan was talking about have a chance to go in and exploit them. For both of those services that I mentioned, you get a dedicated cybersecurity advisor here at Cygilant. There'll be someone, either Evan or somebody on Evan's team, that's going to work with you directly to ensure you're getting value quickly. So if you do want to learn more, we're happy to schedule a quick demo, show you how it works, answer your questions at a time that's convenient for you. Just leave us a quick note here. I think Joe's got a poll up on the screen. You can type it in there, or you can go to our website, and we'd be happy to get in touch.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, everyone, we'll just leave this poll up just to make follow-up a little easier for you all. We want to make sure that if you had additional questions or would like a personalized demo, that we can get in touch with you in as fast as possible and get that scheduled for you. All right, we'll leave this up for a couple more seconds. If looks like everyone has engaged with the poll, so we'll move on. We do have one more thing for everyone who joined us today. Pleased to announce that we've released our SMB cybersecurity playbook into the world, and everyone who was in attendance today is going to be receiving a copy of it. So keep a lookout in your mailbox. We developed this playbook specifically for small to medium-sized businesses, and I think it's a perfect fit for those in the higher education space. It's going to arm you with some knowledge and some insights on how to combat a lot of the common challenges that are present in your industry. With that, we can open it up to questions, comments, concerns, what have you. But I do want to thank everyone again. Evan, Kevin, thank you guys so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And we'll be running these more frequently. So keep a lookout. Make sure you subscribe to the Cygilant blog and Cygilant newsletter for upcoming events. All right, everybody, we'll let you get back to it. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. And thank you from everyone here at Cygilant.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.